The woman who abandoned Emma Mercer when she was 4 years old returned 18 years later with bodyguards, lawyers, and the keys to a $5 million mansion, then smiled like she had not left a hungry child outside a grocery store in the rain. Emma had imagined many strange things happening on her graduation day. She had imagined tripping on the stage because the shoes Diane bought her were beautiful but clearly designed by someone who hated feet. She had imagined crying when they called her name because she had worked too hard and slept too little for too many years not to feel something. She had even imagined Diane crying loudly enough to embarrass her, which was less of an imagination and more of a promise. What Emma had not imagined was a woman in a cream silk dress walking into the hotel restaurant with 3 men in black suits behind her, looking across the room as if every candle, every waiter, and every person breathing belonged to her. Emma Mercer was sitting near the window with her graduation cap on the chair beside her and a half-eaten slice of chocolate cake in front of her. Outside, Chicago glittered under a soft evening rain. All glass buildings and wet streets and yellow lights stretching across the pavement like melted gold. Inside, Diane Mercer was trying to take a picture of Emma without crying, failing, wiping her eyes with a napkin, then pretending she had gotten frosting on her face. Diane had done that kind of thing Emma's whole life. She cried, then hid it badly. She worried, then made jokes. She worked double shifts, then acted like she had only stopped by the diner because she loved the coffee. She gave everything and called it no trouble. Emma knew better. She knew because she remembered the day Diane found her. Not clearly, not like a full picture, more like pieces that still lived somewhere deep in her body. Cold pavement, wet socks, a shopping cart with one bad wheel squeaking nearby, her stomach hurting because hunger had become something bigger than hunger. She remembered a woman's voice saying, "Sweetheart, where is your mom?" She remembered not answering because she did not know what kind of answer would make the woman leave. Then she remembered Diane sitting on the curb beside her in a yellow grocery store poncho, opening a pack of crackers and saying, "Okay, we can be quiet first. Talking can come later." Talking had come later. So had soup, blankets, police questions, social workers, court dates. A small bedroom in Columbus with a pink lamp Diane found at a yard sale. A last name. A home. Diane had not been rich. She had been a pharmacy cashier with a tired back, a stubborn heart, and a laugh that made rooms feel less cruel. She adopted Emma when other people said it would be too difficult. She raised her when people whispered that single women should not take on a child with no history and too many nightmares. She sat beside Emma through fevers, school meetings, body shame, bullies, scholarship forms, and every awful math worksheet the American education system had ever invented. Diane Mercer had not given Emma blood, but she had given her everything blood was supposed to mean. That was why Emma's smile was so real when Diane lifted the phone again and said, "One more picture." "Mom," Emma said, leaning back in her chair. "You have taken 47 pictures of me holding a fork. You only graduate from law school once. I graduated from college too. And I took pictures of that fork too, didn't I?" Emma laughed, and Diane's face softened with pride, so open it almost hurt to look at. Emma was 22 now, fat, sharp-tongued, brilliant, and fully aware that some people saw the first word before they ever saw the others. She had learned young that people liked girls who apologized for taking up space. She had never been good at that. Diane had raised her to sit comfortably in chairs, in rooms, in arguments, and in her own skin. When Emma came home from 8th grade, after a boy called her a whale, Diane had put down the laundry basket, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Whales are huge, smart, emotional, loyal, and impossible to ignore." "Sounds like he accidentally paid you a compliment." Emma had repeated that line for years. Now, sitting in a downtown Chicago restaurant after graduating near the top of her class, she felt large in the best way. Large with joy. Large with relief. Large with a future that had not always felt possible. Then the restaurant changed. It did not grow quiet all at once. It happened slowly. A hostess stopped mid-step near the front desk. A waiter lowered his tray. Two men near the bar turned their heads, then quickly looked away. The air seemed to tighten, before Emma even saw why. Diane noticed it too. Her smile faded, and her hand moved instinctively toward Emma's wrist, the way it had when Emma was small and a stranger stood too close in a store. The woman in cream silk walked toward their table. She was beautiful, in a dangerous, expensive way, the kind of beautiful that felt less like softness and more like strategy. Her dark hair was twisted at the back of her neck. Diamonds rested at her ears. Her heels made almost no sound against the polished floor. Behind her came two men with flat expressions, and a third carrying a leather document case. Not bodyguards exactly, not lawyers exactly. Something colder than both. Emma set down her fork. Diane stood. The woman stopped at the edge of the table and looked at Emma as if she had been waiting for this moment for years, then looked at Diane as if Diane were a piece of furniture placed in the wrong corner. "Emma Mercer," she said. Emma's eyebrows rose. "That depends on who is asking." A faint smile touched the woman's mouth. "You have your father's directness." Diane's fingers curled around the back of her chair. "Who are you?" The woman did not answer her. Her gaze stayed on Emma, moving over the graduation dress Diane had saved 3 months to buy. The curls Emma had pinned herself in the hotel bathroom, the gold hoop earrings, the soft round face, the calm eyes that had never belonged to a woman easily frightened. "My name is Victoria Caldwell," she said. "And I am your mother." The sentence did not land loudly. It entered the room quietly and broke everything. Diane went still. Emma stared at her for 1 second, then 2. Somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked softly against wood. Rain tapped the window. The candle on the table trembled in its small circle of light. Then Emma picked up her fork again and took another bite of cake. Victoria's smile faltered. Diane turned to Emma in disbelief. "Baby," Emma swallowed. "I'm thinking. With cake, it helps with shock." Victoria's eyes narrowed by the smallest amount, as if she had expected tears, maybe anger, maybe a trembling reunion that could be shaped for witnesses. Emma gave her none of it. She had learned from Diane that some people brought storms into your life just to see whether you would run into their arms for shelter. Emma preferred to check the roof first. "You may doubt me," Victoria said, her voice smooth. "That is understandable. That is generous of you." One of the men behind Victoria shifted. Diane noticed. Emma noticed too, and her expression changed. The softness left her face. Diane stepped closer to the table. "You need to leave." Victoria finally looked at her fully. "Diane Mercer." Diane's face hardened. "Do not say my name like you own it. I know this is difficult. You do not know anything about difficult if you think you can walk in here on my daughter's graduation night and introduce yourself like a surprise guest." A shadow moved across Victoria's face. Not guilt, something more complicated. "Your daughter," she repeated. Emma pushed her chair back and stood. She was not as tall as Victoria, but she did not need to be. Emma had never believed power lived only in height. Sometimes power was a woman, standing in a crowded restaurant with frosting on her fork, and refusing to blink first. "Yes," Emma said, "her daughter." For the first time, Victoria looked genuinely affected. It passed quickly, but Emma saw it, a tiny crack beneath the diamonds. "I did not come to take anything from you," Victoria said. Diane laughed once. It was not a kind sound. "You came with lawyers." The man with the leather case cleared his throat. "Mrs. Caldwell has brought documentation confirming biological relation, as well as a transfer deed and a financial trust instrument related to Miss Mercer's inheritance." Emma looked at him. "That sentence needs a helmet." He blinked. "Excuse me?" It hit the table too hard. Diane almost smiled despite herself. Victoria did not. Victoria lifted one hand, and the man opened the case. He placed a folder on the table, then a set of keys beside it. The keys were tied with a thin black ribbon. The gesture looked elegant. It felt like a trap. Victoria's voice softened. There is a house in Lake Forest. It belongs to you now. 5 bedrooms, lake access, private grounds, full security, and enough distance from the city to give you peace while you consider your future. Emma stared at the keys. Diane stared at Victoria. The room seemed to lean closer. You brought me a mansion, Emma said slowly. Yes. Because you missed my school plays? Victoria's face went quiet. Emma's voice stayed calm, which was how Diane knew she was furious. Or because you felt bad about not teaching me how to ride a bike. Or because you forgot to pack me lunch for 18 years and thought, well, real estate should cover it. Emma? Diane said softly, but there was no correction in it. Only a warning not to bleed where sharks could smell it. Victoria inhaled. I gave you away because I had no choice. Diane's eyes flashed. People with no choice do not arrive with diamonds that could pay off a hospital wing. You do not understand the family I came from. No, Diane said. I understand the child you left. That struck. Victoria looked away for the first time. Emma should have felt satisfaction. She did not. She felt cold. Not because Victoria claimed to be her mother. Not because there were keys on the table worth more than every apartment Diane had ever rented combined. She felt cold because some buried part of her, some 4-year-old part still waiting outside a grocery store, had lifted its head when Victoria said, "My name is your mother." Emma hated that part immediately. Then the front doors opened again. This time, the whole restaurant stopped pretending not to watch. A man entered alone, though Emma somehow knew alone did not mean unprotected. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that looked simple only because it had nothing to prove. His hair was dark, his face unreadable, and his eyes moved once across the room before landing on Victoria Caldwell. Around him, conversations faded with the tired obedience of people who had learned survival from silence. Victoria stiffened. The men behind her did too. Emma noticed that and became interested. The man walked toward them with unhurried steps. He had the kind of calm that did not ask permission from the room. It took it. When he reached the table, his gaze moved briefly to Diane, then to Emma, then to the keys resting between them. "Victoria," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges, and oddly pleasant if one ignored the fact that every man near the bar had suddenly discovered his drink was fascinating. "Nico," Victoria replied, "this is a private family matter. That explains the lawyers and soldiers." Emma looked between them. "I'm sorry. Are we collecting dramatic entrances now? Should I call someone else? I know a professor who once walked into class during a thunderstorm wearing a cape." The man's eyes shifted to her. For half a second, no one moved. Then his mouth almost smiled. Almost. Victoria did not like that. "You must be Emma," he said. "And you must be the reason the waiter just forgot how hands work." This time the smile was real, brief and dangerous, because it changed his whole face. Not softer exactly. Warmer maybe. Like light hitting the side of a blade. "Nico Bellante," he said. Diane's face tightened. She knew the name. Emma did not, but she knew Diane's face. That was enough. Victoria's tone sharpened. "You have no business here." Nico looked at her. "I have business anywhere the Caldwells start moving pieces on a board." Emma glanced down at the keys. "Am I the piece?" No one answered fast enough. That told her more than an answer would have. Emma leaned back slightly, arms crossing over her chest. She was suddenly aware of the dress clinging to her hips, the restaurant full of strangers, Diane beside her, Victoria in front of her, and this man named Nico watching her not with pity, not with hunger, not with amusement exactly, but with attention. Real attention. Like he had expected a pawn and found a person holding the board sideways. Victoria recovered first. "Emma, Nico Belante is not a man you should trust. Emma looked at Nico. Are you trustworthy? No. Diane made a small sound of alarm. Emma tilted her head. That was quick. I find honesty saves time. Does it? Not always. Sometimes it starts wars. Emma studied him. You say that like you've checked. I have. Victoria's lips pressed together. This is exactly what I mean. He is dangerous. Nico did not deny it. That bothered Emma less than it probably should have. Dangerous people who admitted they were dangerous were still dangerous, but at least they were not selling the knife as a bouquet. Victoria moved closer. Emma, there are things about Chicago, about my family, about your birth, that you cannot understand yet. I came to bring you home. Diane stepped forward. Her home is with me. Victoria looked at her with polite cruelty. In Columbus? In a rented duplex with bad plumbing and overdue bills? Emma's face changed. Nico saw it. So did Diane. The room seemed to get smaller around Victoria, though she did not yet realize it. Emma placed her fork down carefully. You can say almost anything to me tonight, because I am curious. And unfortunately, curiosity has ruined smarter women than me. But you do not get to stand here in your expensive grief and make my mother's sacrifices sound small because they were not wrapped in marble. Victoria's expression tightened. Emma continued, voice low and clear. That rented duplex had birthday candles in it. It had flu medicine. It had Diane falling asleep at the kitchen table with adoption papers beside her. It had someone who stayed. So be careful how you talk about my home. For a moment there was nothing but rain, candlelight, and the sound of Victoria Caldwell losing control of a scene she had clearly rehearsed. Nico looked at Emma like something in him had shifted 1 inch closer. Not admiration exactly. Recognition. Victoria's voice softened again, but now the softness worked harder. I did not mean to insult Diane. I am grateful to her. Diane's laugh came out small and angry. How generous. I am, Victoria insisted. She kept you safe. Emma heard something hidden inside that sentence. Not raised you, not loved you, kept you safe, as if Diane had been a temporary shelter. A storage place, a woman useful for the years Victoria could not afford to claim her. Emma touched the edge of the folder but did not open it. Why now? Victoria looked at her. Because you are ready. No, that's pretty, but it's not an answer. Nico's smile barely appeared again. Victoria ignored him. You have proven yourself. Law degree, honors, discipline, intelligence, strength. You have become someone who can survive what you were born into. Emma stared at her. Then she looked at Diane, then at the keys. Something about that sentence tasted wrong. You've proven you're worthy of coming home, Victoria said. Diane whispered, Oh, absolutely not. Emma looked back at Victoria. Worthy. Victoria seemed to realize too late that she had chosen the worst possible word. Emma stepped closer, slow enough that neither bodyguard moved, but direct enough that both watched her hands. She had no weapon. She did not need one. She had a voice Diane had raised not to shake. I was worthy when I was 4, Emma said. Hungry, scared, dirty, and crying outside a grocery store. I was worthy before a diploma, before grades, before I learned which fork rich people use to pretend dinner is complicated. So if you came here to tell me I passed some invisible test you gave from a distance, you can take your mansion and choke on the mailbox. Diane closed her eyes briefly, like a woman praying and trying not to laugh at the same time. Nico looked away toward the window. His shoulders moved once. Emma narrowed her eyes. Are you laughing? No. You're lying. Yes. Against every sane instinct. Emma almost smiled. Victoria did not. Her face was still beautiful, still controlled, but her eyes had gone hard. For 1 second, Emma saw the person beneath the mother, the strategist, the survivor. The woman who had not come alone because love did not need security, but power always did. Then Victoria reached into her purse and removed a small photograph. She placed it on the table. Emma did not want to look. She looked anyway. The picture showed a little girl in a yellow sweater standing in front of a brick school building. Her hair was in two uneven puffs. Her backpack was too large. Her shoes were white with pink flowers on the sides. Emma knew those shoes. Diane had found them on clearance and bought them a size too big so they would last. Emma's throat tightened before she could stop it. Diane reached for the photo with a shaking hand. "Where did you get this?" Victoria was silent. Emma picked up the picture. On the back, written in neat black ink, was a date. She was 11. The restaurant vanished a little. All the sound moved far away. Emma looked at Victoria. "You had a picture of me when I was 11. Victoria's face did not move. Diane's voice broke with anger. "You knew where she was." Nico's expression hardened. The men behind Victoria grew very still. Victoria reached for the photo, but Emma moved it out of her reach. "Answer the question," Emma said. Victoria inhaled slowly. "It is more complicated than that." Emma gave a small nod. "People always say that when the simple answer makes them look terrible." Nico's gaze did not leave Victoria now. Diane's hands were trembling. Emma noticed and moved closer, until their shoulders touched. It was a tiny thing, but Diane leaned into it like she had been holding herself upright on pride alone. Victoria's eyes flicked between them. Something almost like jealousy crossed her face. Then Nico spoke, quiet and cold. "You should leave." Victoria turned on him. "This is not your decision." "No," Nico said. "It's hers." The words landed strangely in Emma's chest. "Not mine. Hers." Victoria seemed to hate that too. Emma looked at the keys again. $5 million. A house on the lake. A birth mother with a story full of holes. A dangerous man who refused to pretend he was safe. A mother beside her who had nothing to prove and everything to lose. Emma picked up the folder. Diane turned to her. "Emma, I'm not accepting anything," Emma said softly. "I'm reading." Diane swallowed. "Okay." Victoria's face relaxed slightly, as if even that small movement felt like victory. Emma noticed. Nico noticed Emma noticing. That made him smile again. Emma looked at him. "Do you always hover around family disasters?" "Only the interesting ones. Lucky me." Maybe. The word should have sounded arrogant. It did not. It sounded like a warning he was giving himself. Victoria gathered her gloves from the table. "My car is outside. Come with me tonight. See the house. Hear the full story away from strangers." Diane said. "No." Victoria looked at Emma. "You are an adult. You can decide for yourself." Emma glanced at Diane. Diane's face was pale, but she did not tell Emma what to do. That was the difference between fear and control. Diane was terrified, but she still left the door open. Emma loved her so much in that moment it hurt. Then Emma looked at Victoria. "I'll meet you tomorrow. Public place. No bodyguards at my table. No lawyers speaking for you. And if you insult my mother again, I'll leave before dessert." Victoria's mouth tightened. "That is not how things work in my family." Emma smiled without warmth. "Then your family is about to have an educational experience." For a second, Victoria looked like she might argue. Then her eyes moved to Nico, to Diane, to the restaurant watching behind polite silence, and she made the smarter choice. "Tomorrow," she said. "Noon. The Drake. Expensive. You deserve beautiful things. I deserved them at 4 too." Victoria had no answer for that. She left the keys on the table. Then she turned and walked out with her lawyers and her men following behind her like shadows attached to money. Only when the front doors closed did the restaurant breathe again. Diane sat slowly, one hand pressed to her mouth. Emma sat beside her and placed the photograph face down on the table. She did not want the 11-year-old girl in the yellow sweater staring up at her while she tried not to fall apart. Nico remained standing. Emma looked up at him. "So, Mafia?" Diane made a strangled sound. "Emma!" Nico blinked once, then looked deeply entertained. "That is usually not the first question people ask me. I'm having an unusual day." "Yes." "So?" He slipped his hands into his pockets. "Yes." Diane stood again. "We are leaving." "Good idea," Nico said. Diane glared at him. "Not with you." "I know." That surprised Emma. Nico looked at her, and the amusement faded into something more serious. Victoria Caldwell does not give gifts. She opens doors and waits for people to discover they lock from the outside. Emma held his gaze. "And you tell women what to do often?" "No, because women who listen only because I scare them are not listening. They are surviving." Diane's expression shifted despite herself. Emma studied him more carefully. Nico Belante was dangerous. That much was obvious. It was in the way people avoided his eyes, in the way Victoria's men had watched him, in the way his stillness felt like a weapon resting on a table. But there was something else there too, a restraint so deliberate it almost looked painful. He could have ordered. He had warned. That difference mattered. Emma picked up the keys and dropped them into her purse. Diane stared at her. "Baby." "I know," Emma said, "but if someone puts a $5 million clue on the table, I'm not leaving it for the waiter." Nico's mouth curved. Diane looked between them and pointed a finger at him. "Do not encourage her." "I wouldn't dare," Emma snorted. "That is absolutely what a man says right before daring." Nico looked at her like he wanted to answer, then decided not to. That made her more curious than if he had spoken. Diane put cash on the table, with hands that still shook. Emma gently covered her hand. "Mum." Diane looked at her, and for a second the years folded in on themselves. Emma was 4 again, 11 again, 22 in a graduation dress. Diane was younger and older, and exactly the same. The woman who stayed. "I'm okay," Emma said. Diane shook her head. "No, you're not." Emma's smile faded. "No," she admitted, "but I'm here." Diane held her hand tighter. "Yes, you are." Outside, the rain had softened to mist. Nico walked them to the curb, but kept enough distance that Diane did not have to ask him to. A black car waited half a block away. His, probably. Another waited across the street. Not his, probably. Chicago suddenly felt full of eyes. Emma noticed him noticing it. "Are we being watched?" she asked. "Yes." Diane's breath caught. Nico looked toward the street. "By Victoria's people. Mine are watching them." Emma stared at him. "That was supposed to make us feel better." "No, it was supposed to be true." Diane muttered, "I hate Chicago." Emma almost laughed. Then she looked down at her purse, where the keys rested beside her lipstick and student loan paperwork, and the photograph of an 11-year-old girl whose birth mother had known exactly where to find her. The anger had not fully arrived yet. Shock stood in its way, but it was coming. Emma could feel it waking up. A taxi pulled over. Diane climbed in first. Emma paused before following and looked back at Nico. "Why do you care?" she asked. The mist clung to his dark hair and the shoulders of his suit. He looked toward the road before answering, as if the honest version cost him more than the clever one. "Because the Caldwells never bring someone home unless they need something from them." Emma waited. Nico looked at her then. "And because you told Victoria Caldwell to choke on a mailbox." Despite everything, Emma laughed. It slipped out of her before she could stop it. Warm, startled, real. Nico's expression changed at the sound, just for a second, as if he had not expected the night to contain anything that gentle. Then Diane called from inside the taxi. "Emma Louise Mercer, get in this car, before I adopt a second daughter who makes better choices." Emma opened the door. "You'd be bored." "I would be peaceful." "You hate peaceful." "I hate mysterious mafia men more." Nico stepped back, but his eyes stayed on Emma. "Tomorrow at noon, do not sit with your back to the room." Emma lifted an eyebrow. That sounded like advice. It was. Not an order. No. She nodded once. Good. Then she got into the taxi and closed the door. As the car pulled away, Emma looked through the rear window. Nico stood beneath the hotel awning, still as stone, watching the street instead of watching her. That should not have comforted her. It did. Diane turned toward her slowly. We are going to talk about all of this. Emma leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes. Can we start with the part where I graduated? Diane's face crumpled. Oh, baby. Emma opened one eye. Don't cry. I'm too emotionally busy. Diane laughed through the tears and pulled her into a hug as best she could in the back of a taxi. Emma let herself lean into it. She let herself be held by the only mother who had ever earned the word. Outside, Chicago slid by in silver streaks and red lights, beautiful and dangerous, and suddenly full of doors Emma had not known existed that morning. In her purse, the keys pressed against her side. Beside them sat the photograph. And somewhere behind them, in the city's bright, secret dark, Victoria Caldwell was already planning her next move. By morning, Emma Mercer had learned that shock did not sleep. It sat beside you in bed, with its shoes on, tapping one foot against the floor, waiting for your eyes to open, so it could remind you that yesterday had actually happened. She woke in the hotel room before Diane did, staring at the ceiling, while Chicago traffic hummed far below the window. Her graduation dress hung over the chair. Her cap sat on the desk. The keys to the Lake Forest mansion rested inside her purse, like a dare. Beside them was the photograph of her at 11 years old, the one Victoria Caldwell should never have had, unless she had known exactly where Emma was and chosen silence anyway. Emma reached into her purse and pulled the photo out slowly. The girl in the picture smiled, with 2 missing teeth and a backpack too big for her shoulders. Emma remembered that day now. Diane had braided her hair badly because she was running late for work, then apologized all the way to school. Emma had told her the braids looked fancy because she had not wanted Diane to feel bad. Diane had cried in the car after drop-off. Emma had seen her through the window and pretended not to. That was love, she thought. Not diamonds, not lawyers, not keys on a black ribbon. Love was a tired woman learning how to braid hair at 6 in the morning before a shift she could not miss. Across the room, Diane stirred in the other bed. You're awake. Emma slid the photo under the blanket. No, I'm practicing. Diane sat up, hair flattened on one side, eyes swollen from the kind of crying people did quietly in bathrooms. Practicing what? Being a mysterious heiress. I think I need a robe with feathers. Diane tried to smile. It nearly worked. You scared? Emma looked toward the window. Yes. Diane nodded, because she had never punished Emma for telling the truth. At noon we meet her, Emma said. Then we listen. Then we decide what matters and what smells like rich people nonsense. Diane rubbed her face. Most of it will smell like rich people nonsense. I know. That's why I'm bringing you. You have excellent nonsense detection. Diane got out of bed and crossed the room. She sat beside Emma and took her hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They had survived too much together to believe words fixed everything. Sometimes words only sat beside the wound and kept it company. At 11:45, they walked into the Drake with Emma in a dark green dress, Diane in her best navy suit, and both of them carrying the kind of calm women wear when they refuse to let fear show its teeth. Victoria was already seated near the back of the restaurant. No bodyguards at the table. No lawyers speaking for her, but Emma saw 2 men near the doorway who looked at Victoria too often, and she saw another man near the bar who looked at the men near the doorway. Nico's, she guessed. Chicago had begun to feel like a room full of people pretending not to hold knives. Victoria stood when they approached. Emma, Diane. Good, Emma said. You remembered both names. Victoria accepted that without reacting. She looked softer in daylight, but Emma trusted that less. Night made dangerous people dramatic. Daylight made them careful. They sat. A waiter appeared too quickly. Emma ordered coffee and pancakes, because if a woman was going to explain why she abandoned her child, Emma believed syrup should be present. Diane ordered tea she did not drink. Victoria ordered nothing. For several seconds, Victoria only looked at Emma. There was hunger in it. Not the simple hunger of a mother who missed her child, but the complicated hunger of someone staring at something she had lost, and also something she believed she could use. "I was 19 when I had you," Victoria began. "My family was violent, controlled, and obsessed with bloodlines. Your father was not my husband. He was someone I loved before I understood love could get people killed." Diane's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Charles Caldwell, my father, had already chosen the man I would marry. Richard Caldwell was older, connected, useful. The marriage protected alliances. When I became pregnant, I hid it for as long as I could. By the time you were born, I had almost no choices left. Emma poured syrup over her pancakes. "Almost." Victoria flinched at the word. "I gave you away because I believed it was the only way to keep you alive." "Outside a grocery store?" Diane asked, voice low. Victoria looked at her. "No. I left her with a woman who was paid to take her across state lines and place her with a private family. The woman disappeared. I did not know Emma had been abandoned until much later." Emma's hand paused over the plate. That was new. Victoria leaned forward. "When I found out, I looked. Quietly. I had to be careful. If my father knew there was a living child, if Richard knew the truth before I could control the damage, your life would have become a bargaining chip. I told myself that staying away protected you." Emma looked at the photo. She had placed it on the table between them before ordering. "You knew when I was 11. Victoria's mouth closed. "That's not much later," Emma said. "That's 7 years before yesterday. 7 years before my graduation. 7 years of birthdays, school pictures, flu shots, braces, college applications, late rent, and Diane eating toast for dinner so I could afford a debate tournament." Victoria's eyes watered. Emma hated that the tears looked real. "I saw you were happy," Victoria whispered. "I saw Diane loved you." Diane's voice shook. "Then why didn't you knock?" Victoria looked at her, and for the first time, there was no silk in her voice. "Because I was a coward." The answer was so simple that it startled everyone. Victoria looked down at the photo. "Because by then, I had lied too long. I had told Richard the baby died. I had told my father nothing. I had built a life on silence. If I came back, everything would break." Emma stared at her. "So you let me stay gone because finding me would make your life hard." Victoria closed her eyes. That was answer enough. Before anyone could speak, a shadow fell over the table. Nico Bellante stood beside Emma's chair, holding a folded newspaper he clearly had not come to read. Victoria's expression cooled. "Nico." "I was nearby." Emma looked up. "Do you haunt breakfast rooms professionally?" "Only when someone lies before lunch." Victoria's face hardened. Emma should have been annoyed by the interruption. Instead, she felt the small relief of a locked window being checked from the outside. Nico did not sit. He did not take over. He only placed the newspaper on the empty chair beside Emma and said, "Richard Caldwell knows you met her." Victoria went pale. Emma noticed. "Richard is your husband." "Yes," Victoria said carefully. "And he thought I was dead." Victoria did not answer. Nico did. He thought the child died 2 days after birth. That is the story Victoria gave him. Emma leaned back slowly. "And now?" "Now Charles Caldwell is rewriting the family trust," Nico said. "That makes your existence valuable." Victoria stood. "Enough." Emma looked at Nico. "Valuable how?" Nico's eyes stayed on Victoria. "The trust gives voting weight to direct blood descendants in certain family assets. Charles is old. The family is dividing into sides. Victoria bringing home her lost daughter makes her sympathetic, strengthens her blood claim, and gives her a public story powerful enough to soften decades of fear." Emma turned back to Victoria. "So this is about love." Victoria's lips trembled. "It is not only about the trust." "That is not the defense you think it is." Diane pushed her chair back. "We're leaving." This time Emma did not argue. She stood, placed cash on the table, and picked up the photograph. Victoria reached for her. "Emma, please." Emma looked down at Victoria's hand until she pulled it back. "You don't get to touch me because the conversation got uncomfortable," Emma said. "You had 18 years to be my mother. Today you can start by being honest." Victoria's voice broke. "I want you in my life." Emma's answer was quiet. "Then stop trying to arrange mine." Outside, Nico walked them to the curb again. Diane hated that he did, but she hated Victoria's men more, so she allowed it with the expression of a woman swallowing a lemon. Emma stopped before getting into the car. "Why do the Caldwells scare you?" Nico looked amused. "They don't." "Fine. Why do they annoy you in a murder-adjacent way?" This time he almost laughed. Diane did not. "My father died because of a Caldwell decision," Nico said. "Not by their hand directly. That is how they prefer things. They create rooms where other people bleed, then claim they never touched a weapon." Emma's face softened despite herself. "How old were you?" 16. "That's young." "Yes." Something passed between them then. Not romance exactly. Not yet. But the recognition of two people whose childhoods had been altered by powerful adults making quiet choices and calling them necessary. Nico opened the car door for Diane first. Then he looked at Emma. "Victoria will invite you to dinner next. She will want you inside the house, surrounded by family, feeling outnumbered. She already gave me a mansion. Dinner feels modest. Do not go alone." Emma lifted her chin. "I wasn't planning to." He nodded toward Diane. "Good." Emma narrowed her eyes. "You meant you." "I meant whoever you trust." That answer bothered her, because it was the right one. The invitation came 3 hours later. A handwritten note, cream paper, black ink, delivered to the hotel by a man who did not look like he had ever carried anything as harmless as stationery. Victoria requested that Emma and Diane join the Caldwell family for dinner. Richard wanted to meet her. Charles was asking questions. Sophie was eager. Preston would be present. The mansion in Lake Forest could be viewed afterward if Emma wished. Diane read the note twice. "Every sentence in this smells like a trap." Emma was lying across the bed with her shoes off, the Lake Forest keys resting on her stomach. "Yes, but it smells like a trap with answers. You are too curious. You raised me to ask questions. I raised you to ask questions in libraries, not crime palaces." Emma turned the keys in her palm. "Mum, she knew where I was. She had people watching us. I need to know how long, how much, and why now." Diane sat beside her. "And if the answer hurts?" Emma looked at her. "Then we'll be hurt together." So they went. Nico did not ride with them. He did not sit beside Emma at dinner like some self-appointed owner. But when they arrived at the Caldwell estate, his black car was already parked across the long circular drive, and he was leaning against it like trouble in an expensive coat. Diane muttered something under her breath that sounded very unchristian. Emma stepped out. Subtle. Nico looked at the enormous house behind her. I adjusted to the setting. The Caldwell estate was all stone, iron gates, and old money trying to look innocent under soft lights. Inside, the ceilings rose too high, the floors shone too much, and every portrait on the wall looked like it had judged someone poor, at least once. Victoria waited in the entrance hall with Richard Caldwell beside her. Richard was not what Emma expected. He was tall, silver-haired, and deeply tired. When he saw Emma, his whole face changed, not with strategy, not with performance, with grief so sudden it made Emma uncomfortable. "My God," he whispered. Victoria touched his arm. He pulled away without looking at her. "You look like her," Richard said. Emma did not ask who. She knew. Dinner was colder than the silverware. Preston Caldwell sat across from Emma with a face built for contempt. He was handsome in the way expensive watches were handsome, polished and empty. Sophie sat beside him, nervous, kind-eyed, and clearly terrified of saying the wrong thing. Charles Caldwell sat at the head of the table, old and thin, but his eyes missed nothing. Victoria controlled the conversation, like a woman keeping candles lit in a room full of gas. "So," Preston said after the soup, The lost daughter arrives with a law degree. Convenient timing. Emma smiled. I tried arriving with a marching band, but they were booked. Sophie choked on her water. Preston's eyes hardened. You think this is funny? No. I think you are rude, and humor keeps me from throwing bread. Nico, seated 3 chairs away at Charles Caldwell's invitation, lowered his gaze to his plate. Emma suspected he was smiling. Diane definitely suspected it, and glared at him for enjoying anything. Charles leaned back. You have spirit. Emma looked at him. I have student loans. Spirit came free. For the first time all evening, Richard laughed. It was small and sad, but real. Victoria watched that laugh with something like fear. Then Sophie spoke too quickly, as if trying to help. Grandfather only changed the trust because he wanted things clearer before the leadership vote. It wasn't supposed to become so dramatic. The table froze. Victoria's fork stopped halfway to her plate. Emma turned to Sophie. Leadership vote. Sophie went pale. I mean, Preston slammed his glass down. Brilliant. Charles said nothing. Nico looked at Emma, but did not speak. He let the silence do its work. Emma placed her napkin beside her plate. So my existence affects the vote. Victoria's voice was tight. It is not that simple. Emma laughed softly. That sentence should be printed on your family crest. Richard turned to Victoria. Did you bring her here because of Charles? Victoria's expression flickered. I brought her here because she is my daughter, and because she helps you, Emma said. Victoria's eyes filled again, but Emma was beginning to understand that tears could be true and useful at the same time. After dinner, Sophie found Emma in the hall, near a painting of a woman with Victoria's eyes. She twisted her bracelet around her wrist until the skin beneath it turned pink. I'm sorry, Sophie said. I didn't know. Emma studied her. About me? About any of it. Mother said there was a baby who died. Richard believed her. Preston says he didn't, but Preston says a lot of things after they become useful. Emma softened a little. Do you always talk like you're afraid furniture is reporting back? Sophie gave a weak smile. In this house, it might. Then she glanced toward the dining room. There are files. Mother keeps them in the West office. Not just legal papers. Old reports. Photographs. I saw your name once when I was 16. She told me it was nothing. Emma's heartbeat slowed. Reports from when? Sophie swallowed. Years. That night, with Nico's people watching the gates and Diane asleep badly in the guest room beside hers, Emma walked into the West office with Sophie's borrowed key. Nico found her 3 minutes later. Emma did not turn around. I suppose you're here to tell me this is dangerous. I'm here because you left your door open. I did not. No, I opened it. She looked over her shoulder. That is not comforting. I know. But he stayed near the door, not beside her, not over her shoulder, and Emma hated how much she noticed the difference. The files were in the bottom drawer. Not hidden well. Maybe Victoria had assumed guilt grew safer with age. Emma opened the first folder and found her childhood in black and white. School drop-offs. Diane carrying groceries. Emma at a public pool, arms crossed over her body in a swimsuit at 13. Emma at debate club. Emma walking into a clinic with Diane's hand on her back. Reports written in clean language by a private investigator who had reduced their life to times, places, income level, visible emotional condition, neighborhood risk, and maternal attachment. Maternal attachment. Emma stared at the words until they blurred. Diane Mercer demonstrates consistent emotional bond with subject. Subject appears healthy, socially adjusted, academically advanced. No immediate intervention recommended. Emma's hands began to shake. Nico stepped closer, then stopped himself. Emma. She had reports, Emma whispered. She had proof I was alive. Proof I was loved. Proof Diane was my mother in every way that mattered. Her voice cracked. She hated it. Nico said nothing. He did not offer some sharp sentence to make it cleaner. He let the hurt be ugly. Emma pulled one more page from the folder. It was dated 2 months before her 12th birthday. Recommendation: no contact unless Caldwell position changes. Emma laughed once. It sounded broken. Unless her position changes. Nico's voice was low. Now it has. Something inside Emma went very still. By the time Victoria hosted the grand reception 3 days later, Emma understood the shape of the room before she entered it. The hotel ballroom was full of trustees, donors, family allies, men with quiet eyes, women with sharper smiles, and everyone Victoria needed to impress. The Lake Forest deed would be presented publicly. Emma would smile. Diane would be tolerated. Victoria would be forgiven in soft lighting. The lost daughter would become a symbol before she had time to become a problem. But Victoria had made one mistake. She thought Emma wanted to be chosen badly enough to be bought. Emma entered the ballroom with Diane on one side and Nico on the other, though not close enough to look owned by either. Diane wore black and looked terrified, but proud. Nico wore dark grey and made half the room forget what they were saying. Emma wore deep blue, her hair loose, her chin high, her body unhidden. She had spent too many years hearing people suggest what would flatter her, slim her, soften her, reduce her. Tonight she wanted no reduction. Let them look. Let them learn the size of the woman Victoria Caldwell had failed to erase. Victoria stood on the stage beneath golden lights. She spoke beautifully, of regret, of survival, of family returning to family, of a mother's prayer answered after years of silence. People dabbed their eyes. Richard watched her with a face like stone. Sophie watched Emma. Preston drank too much. Charles Caldwell sat near the front, unreadable. Then Victoria lifted the folder containing the mansion documents. Tonight, I give my daughter what she should have had from the beginning. A home. Applause began. Emma walked onto the stage. Victoria smiled with relief. Emma accepted the folder, then took the microphone. The applause faded. Emma looked over the room once. She found Diane first, then Nico, then Victoria. I have one question, Emma said. Victoria's smile stiffened. Emma held up the photograph of herself at 11. If you knew where I was when I was 11 years old, why didn't you knock on the door? The silence was immediate. It was not empty. It was full of every lie suddenly looking for somewhere to hide. Victoria whispered, Emma. No, Emma said softly. Not tonight. You wanted witnesses. We have witnesses. A murmur spread through the ballroom. Emma held up the investigator report next. You paid someone to watch Diane's house. You knew I was safe. You knew I was loved. You knew where I went to school. You knew when I had doctor appointments. You knew my mother worked extra shifts. You knew everything except how to tell the truth. Richard stood slowly. Victoria turned pale. Preston laughed sharply from near the front. Tell them the rest, Mother. Tell them Charles was changing the trust. Tell them you needed a blood heir before the vote. Tell them the lost daughter plays better than the ambitious wife. Victoria looked at him with hatred. Richard's voice was quiet, but it carried. You told me she died. The room changed again. Not louder. Worse. More awake. Sophie was crying silently now. Charles Caldwell's face had hardened into something old and cold. Victoria looked from Richard to Emma, then to the crowd, and Emma saw the exact moment she realized there was no version of the story left that made her noble. Nico moved one step closer to the stage when one of Victoria's men shifted. He did not draw a weapon. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the man, and the man remembered something urgent about remaining still. Emma saw it and continued. This mansion was given to me unconditionally, she said, holding up the deed. So I'll keep it long enough to sell it. A ripple moved through the crowd. Victoria's mouth opened. Emma smiled. I'm going to pay my debts. I'm going to make sure Diane never worries about rent or medicine or car repairs again. I'm going to invest enough that no one can use money to drag me into rooms like this. And then I'm going to start a scholarship in Diane Mercer's name for young people aging out of foster care. because she taught me that family is not who claims you when it becomes useful. Family is who stays when staying costs them something. Diane covered her mouth with both hands. Emma's voice softened. Victoria gave birth to me. I won't deny that. Blood explains where I came from. It does not decide who I belong to. She turned to Victoria. You do not get to buy my forgiveness. You do not get to rename my life. You do not get to turn Diane into a footnote in the story where you become brave too late. If you want any place in my future, it begins with the truth, not gifts. Victoria was crying now, not beautifully, not strategically, just crying. Emma handed the microphone back and walked off the stage. No one clapped. That was fine. Some moments were not made for applause. They were made for endings. The Caldwell family did not collapse that night, but it cracked so loudly that everyone heard it. Richard left Victoria within the month. Sophie called Emma 2 weeks later and asked if coffee was allowed, then apologized for asking like Emma was a court order. Charles requested a private meeting and offered no warmth, only the truth, which Emma respected more than flowers. Preston stayed distant, bitter, and proud, but even he eventually admitted Victoria had lied to everyone, because lying had become the family language. Victoria lost influence slowly. Then, all at once, people stopped answering her calls, first with excuses, then with silence. She wrote Emma letters. Emma read some. Diane read none. That was her right. Forgiveness, Emma learned, was not a family group project. The mansion sold in spring. The first thing Emma did was pay off Diane's house in Columbus, even though Diane argued for 3 hours and then cried in the laundry room where she thought Emma could not hear. The second thing Emma did was clear every debt attached to her education. The third thing she did was meet with a financial advisor who spoke too quickly until Emma told him she had passed the bar and could understand numbers if he stopped treating compound interest like a mating dance. Nico laughed when she told him that, and she tried not to enjoy the sound too much. The Mercer Scholarship launched that summer. At the first small ceremony, Diane stood beside Emma while 3 young people accepted grants for housing, tuition, and living expenses. Diane wore the same navy suit from the Drake. Emma wore yellow because the little girl outside the grocery store deserved sunshine somewhere in the story. When Diane saw her name printed on the program, she whispered, "You didn't have to do this." Emma took her hand. "I know." That was all. Nico remained in Emma's life with the patience of a man who knew better than to rush a woman who had spent months being treated like a claim. He did not ask her to move in. He did not place guards around her without asking, though once he tried to call them drivers with situational awareness, and Emma laughed for 5 straight minutes. He took her to dinner in places where people lowered their voices when he entered, and she stole fries from his plate because fear had never improved potatoes. He warned her. When Caldwell enemies stirred near the edges of her new foundation, she warned him when he began sounding like every solution required a threat and a locked door. "You are being dramatic," she told him one night, after he suggested buying the building next to her office for security reasons. Nico looked offended. "I am being practical. You are trying to purchase a zip code because one man looked at me weird." He looked too long. He was reading the sign behind me. He was pretending to read. Emma leaned across the table and took a piece of bread from his plate. "You need a hobby. I have several. Brooding in Italian does not count." His eyes warmed. "It counts in Sicily." Their love did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like a door opening slowly in a house, where Emma had checked every lock herself. A late-night phone call when Diane had the flu and Emma was scared. Nico bringing soup but leaving it outside the door because Emma said she did not need help. Then texting, "I believe you. The soup disagrees." A walk by the lake where he admitted he had forgotten what quiet felt like before her. A kiss in her office after she won her first major case. Soft at first, then not soft at all, until Emma pulled back and said, "Just so we're clear, I'm not becoming one of those women who waits in restaurants while men discuss danger. Nico rested his forehead against hers. Good. Good? I would hate having to rescue the restaurant. She laughed against his mouth. 1 year after graduation, Emma stood outside the sold Lake Forest mansion for the last time. The new owners had not moved in yet. The grass was bright. The lake glittered beyond the trees. Diane stood near the car, pretending not to be emotional again. Nico waited beside Emma, hands in his coat pockets, giving her silence, because by then he knew, when silence was a gift. Emma looked at the house, that had almost been a cage wrapped in marble. I thought I'd feel more, she said. Nico watched her. And? I feel free. That is more. She smiled. Careful. That sounded wise. I ration it. She looked back at the house. I used to think being wanted would fix the part of me that got left behind. Nico's voice softened. Did it? No. She turned toward Diane, who was now crying openly and pretending the sun was in her eyes. Being loved did. Nico said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, good. Emma looked at him. You say that when you mean something bigger. Yes. What do you mean this time? He turned to face her fully. The feared man of Chicago's underworld. The man who made rooms quiet. The man who had stood beside her in danger, but never once tried to become her voice. His expression held no command, no performance, no claim. I mean, I love you, he said, and I am not asking you to become smaller so my world can hold you. Emma's breath caught. For once, she had no quick answer. Nico smiled a little. That is new. Don't ruin it. I wouldn't dare. She stepped closer. You would absolutely dare. Yes, he said, but not with this. Emma looked at him for a long time, then she took his hand, not because he reached first, but because she wanted to. His fingers closed around hers gently, like even now he remembered that holding was not the same as keeping. I love you too, she said, but if you ever buy a building for my safety without asking, I will make the Mercer Scholarship Fund hold a public seminar called Emotionally Constipated Men and Their Real Estate Problems. Nico stared at her. Then he laughed. Diane turned from the car. I heard that, and I support the seminar. Emma leaned into Nico's side, laughing too, while the lake moved quietly beyond the trees, and the old house stood behind them, no longer a gift, no longer a threat, only a place where a different version of her might have disappeared if she had wanted wealth more than truth. But Emma Mercer had never been good at disappearing. She kept the name Diane gave her. She kept the love Diane built. She accepted pieces of her blood family only where honesty made room for them. Richard became a quiet presence, awkward but sincere. Sophie became a friend. Charles became a warning, wrapped in an old man's voice. Preston became someone she could tolerate at charity events if the appetizers were good enough. Victoria remained outside the center of Emma's life, sending letters, telling more truth than before, learning slowly that motherhood could not be demanded like a seat at a table. And Nico stayed. Not in front of Emma, not above her, beside her. That was the only place she allowed. Years later, when people told the story, they always started with the dramatic parts: the lost daughter, the mansion, the mafia boss, the ballroom confrontation that ruined Victoria Caldwell's perfect return. They loved the money, the danger, the scandal, the way powerful people had gone silent while a fat young woman in a blue dress told the truth into a microphone. Emma understood why. Dramatic stories were easier to repeat, but that was not where the real story lived. The real story lived in Diane sitting on a curb in a yellow poncho, opening crackers for a hungry child. It lived in a hotel room where mother and daughter held hands after the past came knocking. It lived in every choice Emma made after learning she had been watched but not claimed, wanted but not protected, valuable but not loved correctly. It lived in the way Nico Belante, dangerous to almost everyone, learned that loving Emma meant offering his power without turning it into a leash. Family, Emma finally understood, was not blood pretending it had earned the right to stay. It was not wealth, not history, not a house with lake access, not a name old enough to scare a city. Family was the hand that reached for you when no one was watching. It was the person who told the truth when a lie would be easier. It was the one who stood beside you when the room turned dangerous and still trusted you to speak for yourself. And for Emma Mercer, that was enough. More than enough. It was home.